Hello, Cook With Me crew. Welcome online, or welcome to the video today. I am very excited. I guess I'm always excited, aren't I? I just love doing this with you guys. I love hearing your responses when you guys write back to me about everything that you're getting out of these videos. So keep doing that, please. And I am curious, how are you today? I am feeling actually particularly blessed for having met so many wonderful people last weekend in Toowoomba and yesterday at North Lakes. So those of you that are joining us tonight for your first time on Cook With Me Live, welcome. And those of you that are going to be watching this thereafter, welcome. And please know that you are still most welcome to continue interacting on the page as well and asking questions. Even if we don't get back to them straight away, if you're not watching the live, then we can still get back to them after that. So please continue to do that so we can help service you and help, I guess, you to understand so many other concepts in the kitchen and make your life a lot easier. All right, so what are we making today? I had you guys guess some of that on the Facebook page earlier today. I want to show you one of my favorite kind of classics, obviously adapted for now a little bit more of an allergy-friendly / plant-based / creative different version of a stroganoff. Now, I'm curious to hear, those of you that are on with me now, who has had stroganoff in the past, who has it, had it as a basic staple for your family, and who's kind of curious to maybe try a slightly different version, Ashley-fied, of the stroganoff. So this one, we're going to be adding mushrooms into it. Now, I know there's lots of people in this world that do not like mushrooms. So to that, I would say, you're missing out. But maybe you're going to give this a try. Maybe you're kind of on the edge about mushrooms. Give this recipe a crack. There's a lot of other flavor in this that we can build into it. So we're going to get stuck in straight away. Welcome, Glenda. Thank you for being on straight away. Those of you that are also watching along with Glenda live, please give me a little hello. Let me know who's in the kitchen with you tonight, so I can hopefully customize a few little things for you. But we're going to get stuck straight in because this recipe needs a bit of time to cook down. So we're going to start off with the most time-consuming things. One of the other types of skills that you'll be picking up by watching more and more of these types of videos is how we time a meal so that it's all ready at the same time, and also how we can start incorporating a few other efficiency tricks and techniques so that you can be doing other things while you're doing this food prep and sneaking in other opportunities where you can. For the most part, when I do these videos though, I sneak in my opportunities to be able to talk to you and to be able to give you some other value and some other knowledge in that respect. Whereas if I wasn't doing a lot of talking, I would be doing a lot of other food prep at the same time. So I'm always getting at least 3 meals out of every food prep session. But that's for another day, and we cover that a lot more in the program. Welcome, Becky. Oh my gosh, you're cooking with us from Tasmania. This is awesome. Very cool. Hello, Adrian. Welcome. Haven't got all the ingredients, so we'll make it another time. What could replace with the white wine? That's a good question, Adrian. And I'm going to actually not be using white wine tonight. I have a little bit of red wine left. I'll put a little bit of that in just to use up the bottle. But definitely instead of red wine, you can be using more stock. You could be using just more water and a little bit of extra miso paste. It's not a critical ingredient. It's more for that really traditional stroganoff flavor, but that's all good. And welcome, Lexi. Excellent. Sitting and watching. Excellent. I thought that said stirring and watching. Very cool. Thank you, Lexi. Okay, so we're going to get stuck straight in. First step is to get your lentils cooking. So hopefully you've already had them soaking. Okay, and if that's the case, then they will have absorbed. They may have gotten a little bit bubbly on top. And so we're just going to drain off that soaking water. Okay, and then we're going to put fresh water in and get them cooking. Now you might have noticed that I've got a lot of lentils here. So because I was going to be soaking them anyways, I took that opportunity to make, in this case, quadruple the amount of lentils. And I'm going to cook them all up at once because they don't take any longer necessarily to cook up that much more. And with the extra lentils, I'll probably end up freezing some. So I have some in the freezer at all times ready to go. And tomorrow I'm actually going to make up a bit of a lentil dal, so that extras can go into there. So these are just some of the tricks you can do while you're cooking anyways and take advantage of the efficiencies. So I just gave them a little bit of a rinse. I'm going to put them straight back into that pot that I soaked them in. Okay, get them all back in there. And with lentils, you don't need to really measure the amount of water. We just need to make sure we have sufficient water for them to cook down in. These have been soaking since this morning, so maybe about 8 hours. And that's kind of the minimum that we want to let them soak all the extra liquid up. And so then they take a lot less time to cook as well. So that's kind of one of the tricks. It's also going to help them be a lot more digestible, guys. So if you're not in the habit already of soaking lentils or soaking your rices and things before you cook it, that's okay. But try as much as you can for the purpose of the health of your gut and how you feel and how much nutrition you can actually assimilate from them, try to get in the habit of pre-soaking them. All right, so I'm going to add a bunch of filtered water here to that. We'll let that catch up to us. And then we're just going to get it onto high heat until it reaches a boil. And then we'll keep it fairly high, but we're going to make sure we cook the lentils with the lid off. Otherwise, they're going to kind of overflow and foam up at a certain point with the lid on. So I'm just going to let this fill up to maybe an inch or so, a couple of centimeters above the level of the lentils. And that should be enough, given that they've already soaked up a lot of liquid. Okay, so we'll call that good and get them onto high heat. So let's cook them back here. Nothing complicated with this. We want to go high heat, and then hopefully I'll hear it when they start boiling, and we'll take the lid off so we don't have a disaster boil over. Okay, so that's the lentils. We've got them cooking. Next up is we're going to start cutting up the veggies and start getting the pot cooking down as we prepare. So some people I find need to follow a recipe. They need to chop up everything and have it all perfectly ready before you start cooking it. But if you get into your skills and practice a little bit more, then you can be cooking while you're cutting things up to save a lot of time and get dinner on the table a bit faster. So my goal tonight is to get food into my belly because I'm quite hungry. I don't know about you guys. Who's on a scale of 1 to 10, how hungry are you guys? Because I'm just going to go through this really quickly. Hello, Tiffany, welcome. Tiffany, you're cooking, excellent, but you're jumping ahead because you're heading out soon. All right, well, hopefully you've figured that out from the recipe. That's also, maybe there's still some little tips I can sneak in before you head out, so thank you. Okay, we're going to start cooking with eggplant. This is a pretty wonderful looking eggplant, actually. And I love eggplant. I've called for 1 medium eggplant. What does that mean? Well, that's probably about a medium eggplant, but I'm going to throw in an extra one because I've got it on hand anyways. Okay, and remember guys, before we cook eggplant, what do we need to do? We need to make sure we soak it first. Otherwise, it has the potential to go a bit bitter. So we're going to take off as little of that top bit as we can. And then the easiest way to probably get this one sprinkled with salt. When I say soaking, sorry, I think I said soaking, I meant salted, so that we can reduce the bitterness in this eggplant. So I'm just going to do some slices, roughly about 1 centimeter thick. And then we're going to put some salt on top of this and let the moisture bead out. Okay, so we'll lay them flat. And then we'll give them a good little salting. Some people like to say we're going to assault the eggplant. That'd probably work best with a shaker for this one. So a little bit of salt on top of there, but don't worry about the quantity because we're going to be dabbing it off with a paper towel anyways. So you can just put a generous amount of salt on there to let the moisture start beading out from that. And that's going to draw out any potential bitterness that might be in the eggplant, which sometimes happens. And it's that Murphy's Law that the one time that you don't do this, you'll get the bitter eggplant. So it is a good trick to get into just a new habit. Hello, Mandy, welcome. Chad, well to go. Sounds good to have you guys on, that's great. And Mandy, you're watching before you cook. Excellent, very cool. Okay guys, after the eggplant, next step is let's get the onions cut up and let's get the mushrooms ready and the garlic so we can start cooking the process and get that working down. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. Actually, as a matter of fact, we can also save time with one more thing. If you're gonna be cooking some pasta, let's get the water boiling now. Even if we don't put the pasta in straight away, at least the water is ready to go when we are, rather than having to then wait for it to boil. So you're going to need sort of a medium saucepan, depending on how much pasta you're going to cook. I'm going to be making a whole package. In this case, it is 350 grams. So I'm just going to cook the whole thing. And when you're cooking gluten-free pasta, if you're new to that, it does depend quite a bit on the brand, whether you're going to love it or not. I find that this is a good starting place. There's a couple of brands that are a good starting place. This is just one of them. I guess what I'd recommend to you is that you use a little bit more water than you might usually use for pasta, just so that the extra starches and things can come out in the water and you get a nice cook. Okay, so with your pot, kind of go 3/4 full with the pot, and you probably wouldn't cook it in anything smaller than this if you're going to make a whole package of that. So 3/4 of, I guess, the way full with your filtered water if you can, and I'm going to put that on the boil at the same time so it's ready when we are. Okay, so we'll just get that onto max heat as well. So yes, this recipe does require a couple of saucepans on the boil at once, but that's okay in the sense of If you wanted to, you could also double this recipe and make sure you always have some for the freezer as well. So taking advantage of every efficiency step that you can. How are we going, guys? Hello, Paige, welcome. Paige, are you cooking or watching tonight? I'm curious to hear. And Chad. Chad, are you, did you get a night early off work tonight and you're gonna cook with us finally? This is good. Okay, now I've called for one very large onion. If you don't have that, obviously we can make up for that. And you can get creative with this recipe, guys. So it's a very flexible recipe in the sense that it's a savory dish. So if you just had leek, you could use leeks. Both the green and or the white part of the leek too, by the way. I find a lot of people throw away the green bit, but you can definitely use that. And if you didn't have that form of onion, maybe you could just put in a bunch of chives, onion and garlic chives as an example. Or maybe you have some scallions. So just something along, I guess, the onion lines would be great. Okay, so we're just gonna get into this one as quickly as we can so we don't have more tears than we need. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna peel it over here, keep all these teary acids out of my space as much as I can. I don't know if anyone else could be possibly more of a wuss when it comes to cutting onions than me. My eyes seem to be very sensitive to that. So we'll get that out of the way. And there we go. And then the other thing we're going to cover a bit later on is a cashew cream. So those of you that are not used to making a cashew cream before, I want to show you how easy it is. And I also want to talk about all the other uses that I use for the cashew cream because there are many. So we're going to do that at the end too, guys. Paige, so you're watching tonight, but you're making tempeh, watercress, stir fry after you watch me. That sounds cool. Sounds very interesting. And Tiffany, can I over soak the lentils and nuts as I had mine in the fridge for 48 hours? Okay, that is a good question. With lentils, no, you should be fine. You don't need, yeah, if they're in the fridge, they should be okay. Usually though, we'd want to change the water after every 24 hours. 24, well, even 12 hours, you want to change the water. But if they were in the fridge, you should be okay with the lentils. And even if they go slightly fermented, you should still be fine. The cashews, because we're turning them into cream, in this case, not a big deal. So yeah, that'll be fine. If you were cooking, if you were soaking quinoa or buckwheat, then you wouldn't want to go much more beyond sort of the 6 to 8 hours max. Otherwise, they can get, it can get quite like gooey, not gooey, quite thick and dense when you cook it as opposed to the individual grains. So that is a good question. It does apply to quinoa and buckwheat, but not so much on the others. Oh, strong onions. Get rid of this acid. All right, so let's just chop these up and let's get them into the saucepan as fast as we can. A, so that we eat faster, and B, so we stop crying. How's that going, guys? Who makes stroganoff regularly? I'm curious to hear because I've heard that there's a lot of different traditions around stroganoff, and it's become this really nice kind of household, but really personalized and adapted recipe for a lot of people. So there's been a lot of discussions, I guess you could say, on whether people have it with rice or whether they have it with pasta. Some people say, oh no, you gotta have it with mashed potato. So I'm sure it's quite flexible and you can do anything that suits your fancy, but I am curious to hear kind of what everyone's take is on that. Okay, let's get these into the pan and out of our face. Come on over. I didn't even cut them up as small as I would like maybe because I wanted to get them out of my way. FYI too, by the way, if you are working with a Thermomix or some other form of food processor, it is very worth your while to use that to do your chopping for you because it's going to save you a lot of time and stress and energy, and it's going to facilitate you being able to do a double batch rather than have to sit there and chop everything all at once. Okay, so let's add a little bit of olive oil to this pot as well. We've got the heat on there. Okay, we're just going to add a couple of tablespoons roughly of olive oil, and we'll just let that start simmering down. Okay, so that should come on here in a minute. Oh, I'm really actually crying. There we go. Okay, how are we going? Oh, Paige, good, you're coming to mine for dinner. That sounds good. Welcome. Krishna, where are you? Alternative to cashew cream, my son is not allergic. Okay, alternative to cashew cream, yes, you could be putting in a bit of coconut cream instead. So that could give it a bit of creaminess. Otherwise, you could do a sunflower seed cream as well, which will be slightly different, but it's okay. It's still quite a neutral flavor. If he's allergic to all nuts, then yes, I would do sunflower seeds and or coconut cream, depending on your favorite flavor. If he can handle some macadamias, then I would add some of those in with some sunflowers, because it's going to give that nice extra richness. So that's a good question. What else could you possibly do? Actually, you could do blended tofu as well. So it's one little extra step, but it's got that nice creamy sort of richness. Not the same, it's not as fatty. It's like a pure protein as opposed to more of a fatty flavor that we're looking for, but that's another option too. Okay, and Sharon, yes, good trick with the onion. If you burn a candle next to where you're preparing the onions, it'll help with the vapors. That's very true. And sometimes I'm that organized. That's a very good trick, yes. If I know I'm going to be cutting lots of onions, I definitely do that. Coconut and sunflower are both good for you, Krishna. Excellent, awesome. Okay, guys, so we've got that cooking down. We're going to add some mushrooms and the garlic. Now, I happen to have a head of garlic that I roasted earlier today. So just as a little bit of an aside here, do you want to come see this? This is Nature's garlic dispenser. So I just put this whole head of garlic in the oven. It's now cooled. Okay, and then if we've cooked it long enough, we should be able to squish it and have the roasted garlic puree come out. Sometimes it wants to come out the top, sometimes it wants to come out the bottom, so it's just going to depend on how lucky I get here. We might have to go out the other way. So let's give that a good squish. Sometimes it's easier to use the knife. There we go. So it doesn't really look pretty, but it's kind of nice that nature has given us this option and opportunity to have a natural garlic press, really. And it then saves all that effort of having to peel every individual clove. So we're just going to squish out all of that wonderful roasted garlic puree, which has now become a lot less, a lot less pungent. Okay, so it's much more mild in this form. And then you can add a heck of a lot more to it and get that nice roasted flavor, as opposed to like a really pungent, strong, overpowering garlic flavor. Okay, so we're just going to get as much of that out of there as we can. It's usually easier to go out the bottom of the head of garlic there. So I did that maybe the hard way. But that's the garlic. And I can really hear those onions now, so I'm just going to turn them down a little bit. Maybe onto medium, keep them going. Our lentils are not boiling yet, so we're good. We can keep going. Okay, so mushrooms. Now, this is the one that you might not want to process in a food processor if you are using that for saving your chopping, because we want to see the beautiful mushroom pieces, or at least I do. I love mushrooms. Okay, if you are trying to make this for someone who's not a mushroom fan, then go ahead and use your food processor so you can chop them up and they won't even be able to see the mushrooms in there. They might not even be able to detect the taste, maybe. If you've kind of added a whole bunch of other flavor to it, then you should be good for detecting that. It's funny how mushrooms are very polarizing with people, isn't it? Some people absolutely love them and some people really do not, but they are good for a lot of things. And it's really quite fun when you get into the world of mushrooms to discover new ones, new flavors, new versions. Okay, so for example, shiitake mushrooms are extremely good for different things than, for example, oyster mushrooms or button mushrooms. And in particular, shiitake mushrooms, I find, have a very similar texture and experience as sort of like, they work in a lot of dishes where you might otherwise expect chicken. You can get away with sometimes that feeling of, I guess, the chicken experience with the shiitake mushrooms. So it's good to use variety, okay? Instead of always getting the same type of mushroom, try and change it up as much as you can. And here I'm going to keep these pieces about this big so that we can see them still in the sauce. There we go. Okay. So they're ready to go. And look at our eggplant. It's ready to go too. So we've got all that beating happening. And I'm actually all out of paper towels, so I'm going to have to use some Kleenex, which is not ideal. Normally we'd be using paper towel here, guys, but we're going to dab off all of that extra moisture, take out that bitterness, remove a bit of that extra salt if we need to. And that's how we prepare eggplant. So then from here, we're just going to cut this up into some smaller pieces. Ideally, we want that to cook down and soften quite a bit so that we can't necessarily detect or feel and taste into the individual pieces of eggplant. So the more that the eggplant cooks down, the more it kind of creates the texture of the dish that we're looking for and doesn't necessarily stand on its own as a vegetable in the dish. It's going to incorporate into the dish. So I'm just going to cut this into a couple of strips, and then I'm going to go lengthwise with it. Okay. Who's maybe going to be having eggplant for the first time? Who's brand new to eggplant? Or maybe you haven't had such a great experience with eggplant in the past and you're going to give it another crack now. I'm curious to hear, because I know some people have had bad experiences with it, and it's too bad because it's such a yummy and versatile vegetable too, guys. Okay, so I'm just going to go kind of small cubes with this here. And again, remember the trick. You might have heard me say this on other videos if you've been watching a few of them. The trick is, if you really, really love a vegetable, you can get away with cutting it bigger. But if you're not so sure, if you're new to it, or if you know that it's not maybe one of your favorites, but you're trying to like it, then cut the pieces a lot smaller so that you can let your palate adjust to that a bit quicker. Okay, so that's just always a tip and a technique that you can implement in pretty much any dish. So we just want fairly small pieces here. And then this is going to go straight into the pot and start cooking down with the rest of it. How's everyone going so far? Oh, Adrian, thank you. Loving all the helpful tips. That's wonderful. I'm also curious to hear, and if you guys have any other questions specifically about these foods, fire away. Hopefully I can help out. Welcome, Cherie. Thanks for watching. And Cheryl, you've made it already. How did it go? Watching for the tips. Excellent. Good trick. Okay, and there are a few more tips and tricks I want to remember to tell you too by the end of the video, so we'll get to that. Okay, so we're getting through our eggplant here. I can tell that I need to give my knife a bit of a sharpen. There we go. All right, so small pieces of eggplant. This is going to make a nice big batch. And this, I mean, we could get a little bit picky. If you really wanted to see perfect pieces of mushroom, we could put these in later on, but I just want to eat. So let's get all of this into the pot. This is going to reduce down a lot as it cooks. So we're going to give it that time and that opportunity to do so. Okay. So let's add all that eggplant in. And let's say, for example, you didn't have, or you weren't going to be adding zucchini as a zoodle. So you weren't going to be, if you didn't have a spiralizer, or for some reason you weren't going to be adding zucchini, you can always put the zucchini into this dish like this. Okay, so cut it like we did the eggplant and add the zucchini that way, if you're not going to have it as a part of the pasta. Okay, so there we go. This is why we want a nice big pot. Even if you're not cooking a big dish, use a big pot so that next time you could maybe do a double batch and save yourself that energy and that effort. All right, so while we're back here, we might as well give this a little bit of juice to cook down into and to steam with. Oh, and I just saw my lentils. See that? That's nearly gonna boil over. Oh, we just caught it in time. So let's take that off. That should dissipate. And then we're just gonna keep that kind of on the rumble boil. So I might put it down to 8 and just let that continue cooking away. Lentils are really forgiving, and it's pretty hard to overcook them. So we can kind of forget about them until we're ready to take them into the pot. Okay, our pasta water is nearly on the boil. I'm going to turn that down just a little bit because I'm not quite ready for it. And back to the broth. So I've called for about a cup of broth. If you haven't got homemade broth, that's okay. You can be adding extra salt, spices, tamari, miso, something like that. You could even add a little bit of extra nutritional yeast, a bit of extra cashew cream to kind of make up for that little bit of lack of flavor by not having the broth. Okay, so I've got a broth that had some purple carrots in it. So the broth is very purple. And these were just little frozen cubes that I had. So they're just gonna go, it's about a cup that I've got here. We're gonna go straight in with that and let that start cooking down. Okay, and pretty much from this point, you could add the rest of the ingredients to it now and just let it simmer down. Then at the end, we're going to taste it before we add in that cashew cream, adjust a few flavors, and then add the last little bit of a creaminess to it. So you could add the rest of the flavors now. We might as well do that while we're back here. How about that? Because like I said, I kind of want to get eating this. Let's get it cooking down. So we'll let this, I'm going to turn this one up because I want a little bit more action here. And we'll add the rest of the ingredients. Okay. Let's, if this type of thing happens to you where you slightly had a little bit too much water in the pot, we can take off some of this extra foam which is holding in that liquid. Okay, so we can just take a little bit of that off very carefully. You don't have to, but if it looks like it's going to overflow, then we can do that. Or we can turn the heat down, but that would slow everything down. Okay. All right, so. Hey, Allie, how's it going? Thanks for being online. And Jane, welcome. You're cooking up in Noosa. Very cool. That's awesome. It's been a while since I've been up to Noosa. Okay, rest of the flavors. This is how we're building it, okay? The garlic ended up going in as well because I had that on the cutting board. Excellent. So we've got the garlic in, we've got the olive oil in, we need a little bit of we've got the broth in, nutritional yeast, salt, pepper, tamari. So this is how we're going to start to build that sort of meaty stroganoff-y flavor, knowing that we're going to get a lot of benefit from the mushrooms themselves, all right? So about 1/4 cup of nutritional yeast. But that being said, some people are going to like a little bit more than that. Probably not less, but maybe. Okay, 1/4 cup is the same as 4 tablespoons, so I'll go with that. And remember why we're having this one? It's got the slightly cheesy flavor, but it's also really high in vitamin B's. Do you guys remember that? Okay, and about 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. I love a stroganoff quite peppery. If you don't, you can put a little bit less in. It's amazing how much 1/2 teaspoon actually is though. So we'll get up to that. Okay, and then you have options. Now I've called for the tamari or the miso paste or even coconut aminos if you can't do the soy. So these are kind of our savory additions that are going to not necessarily, we don't want this dish to end up tasting like tamari. We want it to blend into the flavor of the rest of the dish. So whenever you taste a savory dish and you taste it and you go, it's good, but I don't really know what it needs. It needs something, but I don't really know what it needs. Sometimes we just need to accentuate what's already there, and that's what the saltiness of the palate does. So these types of ingredients, the tamari, the coconut aminos, the miso paste, those are kind of our saltier ingredients that'll help enrich or bring out the existing flavors in a dish. So that's why we're using it here. I know it's not a traditional stroganoff ingredient, okay, but we're going to start. I think I'm going to do a combination. So I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of the tamari, and I might do 1 tablespoon of miso and go from there. Okay. When I say go from there, I mean I'm going to taste it at the end and we can adjust accordingly. So I'm nearly at the end of my miso here. Miso is quite strong, but we'll go about 1 tablespoon of that as well. Okay. Could add our bit of wine. This is maybe, it's probably not even 1 tablespoon of red wine. Not even. And then we can add extra water as needed. I had a little bit of olive oil in the beginning, maybe a little bit more. As you guys are hopefully seeing, savory recipes are a little bit more forgiving than sweet recipes. So you can start to go by feel, and that is ultimately what I'm trying to teach you, is less reliance on a recipe, more trust in your ability, because you're being upskilled, okay? You're learning new skills and you're learning how to go by feel. That's my goal for you, okay? So rather than show you exactly how to measure everything to the T, I'd rather show you how you can tweak it and adjust on the fly. Also because everyone's palate's going to be different than mine, okay? Those of you that are cooking with me, are we caught up? Jane, you love my apron. Well, thank you. You can there's a way for you to get an apron like this too, Jane. If you, everyone that comes and does my kitchen reset program with me does get an apron like this. So it is, this is a bit of a special thing for those people. Okay, this is, I don't know if you've seen how much this is reduced already, but this goes to show the amount of water content that is in things like mushrooms and eggplant. So there's a lot of, I guess, reduction that we've had here already. The lentils are going well. They look done to me, so we could have a little taste and see where they're at. If you've never had lentils before on their own, you might not know what you're looking for. So in this case, we're just looking for texture. So if it's nice and chewy and not chewy, if it's nice and soft and kind of easy to eat, then it's done. Yes, beautiful. Okay, so those are done. We can turn them off, and then we can add them into our mix as well. Let's give them a rinse. Okay. There we go. So we'll let them drain a little bit into here. Okay. And then again, remember, I purposely cooked extra of the lentils, so I'm just going to be taking roughly a quarter of this and adding it into the mix. I might as well do that now, and then I can show you the rest of the bits here. Okay. So let's do it this way. So this is kind of, sort of, like the mince that a person would regularly or traditionally put into a stroganoff recipe. Okay, so I think that's probably enough for this recipe, maybe a little bit more. So we'll give that a good little stir and incorporate that. And the coolest thing about this recipe is how everything comes together at the end when we add that creamy kind of, well, yeah, when we add the creaminess, because it starts to then pull together the flavors more like a gravy and bring it all together. All right. And the other thing too you don't want to be missing out on is the parsley. So if you do have any access to fresh parsley, it just finishes off this dish beautifully well. Okay. So I'm going to let that continue simmering down. You might even want to put the lid on and let that keep cooking. We are so close now that we could cook the pasta. So let's turn that up a little bit. We've got the boil happening here. Get that onto kind of more of a rumble boil. And we will add the pasta. Now the trick with adding the pasta is that we stir while we add it, so we don't get them clumping together, okay? And that applies for most pastas, but most particularly for the long skinny pastas like the spaghettis or the fettuccinis. Okay, so ideally you've got one of these types of spoons with the pasta edges, and we want to be stirring this while we add it in. Okay, here we go. Okay, and until we get all the pasta in, we just want to move that down the bottom so they don't all stick together. You could have broken the pasta in half as well, but if you like nice long noodles, then this is the way to do it. How's everyone going? You with me? Adrian, wish we had smell-o-vision. Yes, that's what you get when you cook at the same time as me, but I totally understand. Sometimes it's easier to watch it first, isn't it? I'm getting great smell-o-vision right now. Oh wait, I am the vision, aren't I? Okay, that's right. So it does smell good, and I hope you get to have this experience soon. Tiffany, just had your first mouthful. Oh, you're ahead of me. I'm hungry. Slow down. Delicious, and hubby loves it too, so thank you. But one difference, I just had it with one whole chili. Oh, nice. I like it. A spicy stroganoff. Very good. What else? I missed Andrew's comment. Of course I did. That's the deal in our house. I missed what that was about, Andrew. You'll have to fill me in. Okay, from Melina. Good on you. Hope you washed off, Andrew. Good, Andrew. Well done. That's good. Very cool. And Andrew, you cooked it last night. Oh, Louise cooked it last night. Good stuff. Very cool. Did you guys enjoy that? I take it if you did the dishes, then it must have been good enough for you to warrant doing that. So that's awesome. Chantel, welcome. Hello. Watching but not cooking as you're out for dinner. Awesome. You're watching this while you're out for dinner. I love it. That's cool. Maybe you can show the waitress or the waiter that you're with there. That's very cool. Okay, I think I've stirred this enough. It's not going to clump on me. I've kept the temperature up so that we kind of keep that rumble boil happening. It's hopefully going to catch up to me here in a second. And I'm going to leave the lid off for the same reason as the lentils. Okay, so we've got that happening. Most pastas should take around about 8 minutes if they're on the boil. So we'll keep checking that as we go. this is cooking down nicely. Next step is going to be our cashew cream, and then we can eat. So some of you may have looked at this recipe and gone, oh gosh, that's a lot of work, that's going to take forever. But hopefully you can see that just by having a little bit of preparedness of having the lentils and or the cashews soaked in advance, you can pull it together quite quickly. Okay, so cashew cream, that's the next step. Let's show you this from scratch. So let's come back over here. I'm going to drain off the liquid from the soaked cashews and sunflower. And then we're going to put a little bit of lemon, a little bit of water into that and blend it up nice and smooth. Okay. So I've got them soaking. See how they plump up? They're so juicy. And I've also put some sunflower seeds in here too because it makes it go further and it adds just a different dimension. Okay. So I'm going to drain off that liquid the cheat way. And then we're going to spiralize some zucchini pasta. Oh my gosh, I love that. I love it incorporated with real pasta though. I still love real pasta and I think it's okay to have if we're, it's a processed carb, I understand that. But because we're cutting it, as in we're putting it with the zucchini noodles, and also for me, the focus is always on the sauce that goes with it. Being full of veggies, being full of goodness, the pasta is more the treat. So I normally put the sauce down first and put the pasta on top. Except for the sake of photos. Okay, so I've got the cashews and the sunflower. Now, just as a bit of a note, I always double the batch when I make a cashew cream. I try to make a bigger batch than just for the recipe that I need. A couple of reasons. One, the blender actually works better with a bigger batch. Okay, so if it's too little down the bottom, it's hard to get it to blend well and get that convection happening in the blender. The second reason is I love it. So I want to have extra on hand for whenever the need arises to have a little bit of extra cashew cream, basically. It's one of my favorites and it's very versatile. Eventually here I will be showing you also how to make some proper kind of soft cheeses out of cashews as well. I really feel bad for the people that can't have cashews because, oh my gosh, they are amazing. So we'll get a bit of lemon in here. Lemon is going to cut quite the sweetness from cashews. So believe it or not, when we turn this into a cream, cashews are very, very sweet. So the lemon kind of cuts that, and it also sort of contributes a little bit more like a sour cream in this sense, which is the traditional ingredient in a stroganoff. So this is going to make it that slight bit of sour without it tasting like lemon. So using up a bit of extra lemons I had there, and then a little bit of extra water. Now, because this is going to be just going in to make a dish creamier, it's not a big deal exactly how much water we add. The more water you add, the easier it is to get it creamy. So if your blender is not super powerful, then you might want to add a little bit of extra so you can get a really good blend. But you're better off adding more water later after you've figured out where it's at. Because if you add too much, then we're going to get like a really runny cream and it's not going to be useful for other purposes after. So we'll start with that. We could add a pinch of salt depending on how you want to set up your dish. Knowing that I want to have extras left over, I'll put a pinch of salt on there. So come back, let's make that into cashew cream. We may or may not need the wand. And usually we need about 60 seconds for a cashew cream. So here we go. All right, so now that we've got the first little bit of blend down, we can see that it's going to be still a bit too thick. So in order to get that better blend, we're going to add a little bit more liquid to that. Okay. Again, you're better off doing it bit by bit until you understand exactly how much is enough. And we're going to give this a little scrape down too, so it has a better chance of getting everything nice and smooth. There's a couple people that have been doing my program recently that have they've bitten the bullet, they've got themselves a good blender, and oh my goodness, they're so excited at the difference it makes when you have the right tool for the job, guys. So if you haven't already got this and you know that you love cooking in this way, or you love a really smooth hummus, or you love maybe making your own combinations of nut butters, this is the machine to have because this is the way we do it. Even raw desserts, okay? So you know those really creamy, velvety smooth raw desserts that you can get in cafes? This is how they make them. So a nice strong blender with a really high RPM. Here we go. Okay, so I'm being very picky here. I don't know if you can see that. We still have some slight bumpiness to it. Now, because this is going straight into the stroganoff, this won't matter. So we can put this straight in, and even if you're not working with a strong, powerful blender, that's okay in this dish because you won't see it. But if you're going to be having this cashew cream as a spread later, just know that we could take that a bit further by letting it continue to blend down. Okay, so for the sake of tonight, I'm going to leave that. We're going to have that just as it is. But if you'd like to get it smoother, you can. A little bit more time. Okay, so before we add this precious bit in, let's have a taste and let's check our work. It's looking pretty stroganoffy to me now. Everything's cooking down. So we've got the eggplant nice and soft. The skin of the eggplant is soft. That's what we're after. Isn't it amazing how food can bring back memories? That's just crazy that even though my mom made it totally with a different way, a completely different way with tons of meat and dairy, that just brings back so many memories immediately. So I think we're pretty close with that. I'd say I probably, from my palate, I need a little bit of extra saltiness, but definitely that's why I want you to check and taste before you finish the salting of the dish, because everyone's going to be very different on that. And we're going to test the pasta here. We should be close. Good. Okay, so we're just a little bit, we're not quite al dente, we're just on the cooked side of that. So that's good. We're going to stop that straight away. Let's get that through the strainer. Okay, so come back on over and we will finish this up and then we get to eat. Okay, so I'm just going to transfer these guys out so I can have my strainer back. I'll have a couple of lentils in my strainer, in my pasta, but that's all right. There we go. Okay, pasta done. So if you want to keep it hot before you serve it, let's put it back into the pot that it came from, and we'll leave the lid on so we can keep it hot. If you're worried about it sticking together, put a little bit of olive oil through that and just stir it through. For now, I'll leave that be. Okay, so last couple of steps, we're going to chop up a bit of parsley, and we got to zoodle our zucchini, make noodles out of it. Now, after all that, I forgot to put this beautiful mushroom leaf into the stroganoff. So I'm just going to pluck off a couple of these and add that in. It's my favorite, and because my garden is going nuts with it, I want to honor that and use a bit. So if you guys have never had this, maybe you want to track it down at some point or find out how you can get a cutting from my garden. It's called mushroom leaf, and it actually tastes a bit like mushroom. So I figured in honor of this dish, I was going to include a little bit of that in. It's quite a crispy leaf, And it's just that extra dimension. In my opinion, it's actually more importantly added for the purpose of adding in some other beneficial compounds that, I probably will never understand, but I trust that nature is providing something different in this than it would in a regular mushroom. Okay, and then we've got our beautiful flat and curly leaf parsley here to add. Also fresh from the garden about an hour ago. Who's got their veggie garden going? Those of you that are on here that have done my course, I think that's maybe one of your next steps, is to at least get some parsley happening and to see how wonderful it is to be able to just whip out to the garden and grab what you need. It's a very fun and rewarding thing to have happening. Okay, last but not least, let's make some zoodles and then we can eat. This is a little one, but let's go the big one. Okay, so for this zoodler, I need two parallel surfaces for this one. I'm going to do it sideways so you can see what we're doing here. So we've got to skewer this one into the hole first, and then we're going to make sure this has really good contact on this side next. Okay, and then we're going to spin. How easy is that? Insta pasta. This is my kind of making pasta. When people ask me, what do you mean you don't make your own gluten-free pasta? I say, well, I draw the line at making pasta and instead I make zoodles or canoodles or what else can you kind of zoodle? You could do potato if you wanted. But there we have some beautiful zucchini noodles, which I like to then cut through maybe twice just so we don't get huge big strands of it. Let's do one more with the rest of our zucchini here. And I can show you what I mean by those big strands. So quick, so easy. They even have electric versions of this now. So if you really were serious about your zoodles and you loved your vegetable pasta, then I would get an electric one. And or if you've got kids that you really want to get excited about food, then definitely invest in one of these. Get a good one, because the cheap ones will just either be too dangerous or too frustrating to clean or something like that. And look at that. How cool are zoodles? Sorry, get a little bit excited. All right, here we go. A couple of cuts so they're easier to handle. And then I like to, well, let's finish our sauce. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. So we're gonna add that little bit of cashew cream to the sauce, and then we're ready to plate up. So we'll give it one last little taste as well. Keeping in mind that this dish, much like a lot of other dishes, is actually better the next day. So by the time it has a chance to simmer down and meld all those flavors together, that's when it really is delicious. So some people might like to make this, even if you don't get home from work, for example, till late, you might want to make this, not have it for dinner, but have it the next day. And then at least your meal prep is done and you get the advantage of tasting it once it's had a chance to taste even better. So there we have it. I think that looks like stroganoff to me. I don't know about you guys, but tastes pretty good. Let's try it with the cashew cream in it. How are you guys going? Some of you have already eaten. I'm jealous. Hello, Walina. Welcome. Does the taste change much with adding the seeds with the cashews? Good question, Cheryl. You won't be able to detect it in this form. If you're having it straight, kind of as a cream, potentially, but the sunflowers are quite neutral. I'm so happy with that. Yep, that's good. Okay, but like I said before, your palate might want a little bit more saltiness. It might want a little bit more sourness, so add a bit of lemon juice. Or you might just need a little bit more cheesiness, so you could add a bit more of the nutritional yeast. Okay, so play with those flavors. The more you play, the more confident you'll get with the next recipe. And always remember that if you stuff something up, you actually learn more. Take the advantage to learn more in that moment. Okay, so there's no such thing as a stuff up. Let's eat. Yum. Okay, so let's grab a little bit of pasta, a little bit of zoodle, a little bit of pasta, a little bit of zoodle. That's probably enough. Give that a little toss. So the warmth of the pasta is going to help kind of soften that zucchini a little bit. Then I like to make a little bit of a nest for the stroganoff. Yum. Here we go. Oh my gosh, you know Pavlov's dog? That's me right now, I'm salivating. Okay, so we've got our stroganoff, and you cannot forget that little bit of yummy, delicious parsley on top. It does make a difference. It's not just for visual, I promise. Okay, some of you might get really creative and want to add a little lemon on the side. Here's one that came from an event earlier. There we go. And some of you, oh, let's see, some of you might even have your macadamia parmesan already ready to go. So if you really wanted to be super decadent, you could even put a little bit of that on there. There we go. We did it. Did you do it? Some of you are already eating. I want to see your photos. Please engage. Show me your photos of your stroganoff, how you presented it, what you had it with. But here we have it, guys. Another Cook With Me. Thank you so much for being online. Mushroom stroganoff. Would love to hear your feedback and also hear your ideas for future Cook With Me's that you want to cook. Thank you and bon appetit.